Welcome to Anxious Tea Time, the show where we discuss the wonderfully different aspects of mental health.
I'm Ellie.
And I'm Gulli.
This week we're going to be discussing video games and their complex impact on mental health.
That's right. Video games are becoming more and more popular these days for everyone. People of all ages and genders seem to be playing more and more games.
Well, is that really true, or are we just hearing about it now? I've really associated video games with the younger generations, and are people actually playing more games now?
Yeah, although it's impossible to find the complete numbers. In terms of money and spending, the UK was in 2018 Europe's second largest video game market after Germany, and the fifth largest in the world. In fact, it is estimated that the UK has 37.3 million players who spent £4.5 billion on games and in-game transactions. And in terms of genders, there isn't actually that much of a difference. According to Newzoo, 49% of men and 48% of women in the UK play mobile games, while 38% of men and 26% of women play PC games. And although statistics on age, gender, and the types of games we prefer vary, a lot more people are playing games than ever before. Does that sound right to you, Ellie? Thinking about your own friends and the people you're around.
I mean, I'm one of the people who plays many platforms. I'm PC, I'm PlayStation, I've had an Xbox and a mobile game, and even on those separate platforms you end up talking about other platforms. So we'll be on PlayStation, for example, and in the background you can hear someone playing Clash of Clans, which is a mobile game where you build up your own town and you invade other people. But it's nice because of a lot of games these days aren't very gender specific or anything, so it does sound right that pretty much half of men and women do play mobile games, and there's quite a high percent of people who do play PC and console games as well. So I see that happening completely with my friends as well.
Yeah, same. Is quite interesting because especially more quote-unquote violent video games are seen as more of a boys type thing.
Yeah.
But have you found that at all? Are there differences in the different kind of games you play and the gender ratios for the games you play, or do you find it's pretty much even?
Well, I can see the statistics there, and it's just sort of I know most of the people I play with are also guys, and when you're online, when a guy sees a girl playing something like Siege, which is a shooting game where you defend yourself and then other people attack you, that there is a lot of games, and when they see a girl they're like, there's a girl playing this game? When on mobile games, for example, if you see a girl playing the Clash of Clans that I said earlier, it's a mobile game. It's something you could do anywhere, and it's not something most people say that girls would prefer to go outside, and guys will be the ones playing in video games. But with a mobile game, you do it anyway. You could be out on a night out and just whip out a mobile game.
Yeah, that's very true. To have that kind of difference between more console games or playing the PlayStation and playing mobile games, and I think that public opinion around different games are a bit different as well. It's something different, the image you have of someone sitting in their basement playing some kind of shooting game on their PlayStation versus someone who's being on the bus playing Candy Crush, a very popular puzzle game, which I'm sure most people are very familiar with.
Yeah, definitely.
And I also do think it depends on the age or what kind of social groups you're in. At least for our age, and we're both students, it's way more common to know people who play games more casually or maybe not so casually. And we might therefore look at people who play games a bit differently than someone who may not be as familiar in more of a community or social group centering around games. But I would say that even in our social groups, there are certain stereotypes associated with playing more violent games, more first-person shooter games and such, right?
Oh yeah, so the main topic of mental health and video games is there's something that we do have to address. The elephant in the room is, for me at least, most of the time you hear about video games and mental health, it's often to do with the impact they have on aggression and violence. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on this topic as it has been discussed intensely in the media, honestly, more than I think it's warranted, but it's still something that needs to be addressed before talking about other things.
Yeah, I completely agree. And even in terms of research, the results are very mixed. There is research to suggest that video games can temporarily increase aggression and make us more desensitized to fictional violence, which makes sense. If you sit and play really violent video games for 3 hours, you kind of become used to it. However, it's hard to establish a direct link, or it's hard to determine if video games can long-term make you more aggressive and violent, or if certain people who tend to be more aggressive enjoy certain types of video games. Furthermore, research on the topic is now taking on a more nuanced view, because most of the studies in these things have tended to be done in labs. You come in, you play a very intense game, and you're kind of given a survey maybe of how angry you feel.
Yes, it's not just real life.
Yeah, it's not just like real life. And again, like, people get aggressive at all sorts of things, like driving. Right, I'm sure if I interview you right out of you've been out for like a really in rush traffic.
Yeah.
You won't be like the happiest person there. That doesn't make you a more violent person. But it's a very complex conversation. And what's your personal opinion on this, Ellie? Do you think video games can cause aggression and violence more so than other things?
I think in the short term it makes complete sense, because when you're playing a game and you keep dying at a game, you're going to get angry, but it's not something that's just, it will persevere throughout your day and it will just completely just keep being a part of your life. And when you hear about the tragic events of like school shootings and stuff like that, it's not like someone has played a game like GTA, which is an action series where you end up shooting a lot of people and breaking the law a lot. It's like someone will be playing that game and then suddenly be like, oh, I really feel like
you want to do
something.
this now.
Yeah, this is something I've got to do. It's something that's normally, it's very centered around what's happening in their life and something big happening. It's not, oh, I play these video games, oh, I'm getting really angry, oh, my bully said this the other day. It's not all something that just suddenly links up. You have to think about the other variables in someone's life in the first place.
Yeah, it's very true, and especially when you look at the statistics about how many people actually play games, if video games caused as much aggression and violence as some articles might want you to think, wouldn't everyone just be like really violent? Wouldn't society be like just chaotic at the moment? But what you see is like, well, even though people are playing more video games than ever, you don't really see any like significant link to increased rates in violence or aggression.
Yeah, no, it's like when you see that there's, obviously you see that 50% of men and women are playing video games and mobile games, you don't see that 50% of men and women are now killing everyone.
Imagine.
It's not just that sort of link, they've just sort of seen like these small things of just, oh yeah, this person who did this, these 3 people who have done this awful action all have this link of one thing, but there's obviously other variables like, oh, all of them smoked, therefore all smokers will become murderers and aggressive and violent.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and that's not to say that video games have no impact on anything and that we shouldn't be critical to something that is quite like a new form of media. It's more immersive than other media types, and similarly to when the TV and movies started becoming more prevalent, people were scared that, oh no, this is going to teach our kids all these bad things and you're going to see all this terrible behaviour. And obviously I don't fully agree with that, but at the same time there is research to suggest that, well, the media we consume does impact our, if not nothing else, opinions. So I don't want to give video games like just completely let it off the hook, because definitely it's good to be critical about what games you play, what games your children play, how you feel yourself when playing games, because I'm sure you can attest to this, that some video games leaves you feeling more better than others in terms of frustration, in terms of the people you interact with, than other people. So it's about just being more conscious, I would say. But I don't think the moral panic about video games just causing all these violent shooters is necessarily justified.
Yeah, I mean, you could see that it definitely has an impact in some sort of way. Like, if, say, playing a violent game is sort of in your usual schedule and you're already in a bad mood and you play this game and it makes you more angry, it could almost be feeding it. But I wouldn't quite say it's like a causal reaction, like they're saying, like, oh, play video games, you're insane, sort of things. But
definitely. And for a lot of people, it can be just letting off steam. Like, you had a bad day, you're just mad at everything, just nothing is going right, and just like being able to let off some steam with video games, that's obviously very beneficial for some people. After like a long day, you just want to shoot some things, want to build some bridges, going to do, it sounds like terrible, but it's like it's a simulation. And I'm assuming most people who do play video games are aware that, like, well, this is a game. At the same time, if you watch a maybe violent action movie, you are aware that, like, well, this is actually fiction and I don't want to go out shooting other people after this.
Yeah. completely.
So with that a bit out of the way, let's jump fully into the mental health discussion of video games, an area I find like really fascinating. Because traditionally, as we kind of touched on, much of previous research on video games have focused on the negative mental health effects of playing them. And I find that it's mostly focused on console and computer games and not as much as mobile games. For example, there have been a few studies that have found a link between lower social and psychological well-being and pathological gaming, meaning gaming just way too much. And there's also been a study finding that like declining social skills and more loneliness and lower self-esteem have also been linked to more excessive gaming. However, most of these studies suggest that the poor psychological states and the loneliness kind of came before the excessive video gaming. That it's more you're already feeling low, you're already being a bit lonely, you're already having a hard time socializing, that then games can become kind of an outlet or a refuge in a way, instead of the other way around. And I personally haven't had a problem with excessive video gaming, even when my mental health was very poor. However, I have seen a lot of my peers who would seem to fit in with this research. What do you think, Ellie? Do you have any experiences with this?
I mean, I've almost been on like both ends of these spectrums. So I've also been like the person I was very extrovert, and then I went into gaming and then I became this quite quiet person and just sort of stuck to online friends. But then I've also been the person for like a whole entire year. I was very much an introvert and didn't really go outside, and I played games a lot. And because of the platforms that they have on there and the social connections that you can gain, that it's almost like an upturn. Because I had very poor mental health when I was around 15, and then I played these games consistently, and as angry as I got or anything, I had these people surrounding me in this whole community online through games, and it ended up making me move to the other end of the country, making more friends. I got go to university, and it can go either way, but it is, you're right, it does depend on the person and the situation and how much different things can affect them in different ways.
That's very fascinating to hear, and I think that's one component that's very important to discuss, and I feel a lot of research tends to ignore a bit, or just the discussion overall, how most games these days, especially console and PC games, are very interactive, they are very social. Even if that means that you have a voice chat going on and you can literally talk to other players, or if you join more online communities you can play games together. Games are inherently more so than now, because of technology, more interactive, more social, more fun, and it's obviously a bit easier to meet people from all over the world with similar interests.
Yeah, and it's great because obviously if you have something like anxiety, which is extremely common in the UK, you're very worried to meet new people, and it could be a good and bad thing that online you're a bit more confident, because obviously that leads to some bad things, but it could also lead to good things, because you gain a lot more confidence of who you are when you're talking to someone and they can't really see you. So you may be anxious, but when you're talking to them you feel a lot more comfortable, and when you're preoccupied playing games at the same time, it's distracting that main sense of you're terrified, that it's just I'm playing games, I'm screaming, these people are seeing all these different sides of me because of these games. That I think that games could be very positive for people with mental health problems, because it could support them in a way, and it can get them into different communities that they never thought they'd be interacting with.
Yeah, that's a very interesting, because I moved to the UK almost 3 years ago now. I'm an international student, and I found that just using games, all sorts of games, have made it easier to stay in touch with my friends back home. Obviously I will call them and talk to them anyways, but it's something about doing something together. It's sharing an activity, just having fun together, maybe doing more of a more type of crafting game or mining game, or just building something or being on the same team. It's just really fun. And what I also found, and I'm not sure if you agree with this, is that because of, in my experience at least, video games, or at least video game communities, people who are very active in them, tend to often have a bit of anxiety or depression, or at least be familiar with it. So I've actually found that a lot of these online communities can be more understanding when it comes to mental health? Have you found the same thing?
It's a sort of, I think it's the type of personalities, like we discussed before, that the types of people who play these games usually have a lot more in common than you intentionally thought you would. And when you're playing games like that, you find people who you can relate to, but it also means that they're going to be people that you're going to be able to talk to the longer you play games with them. So all the support that you're getting, the underlying parts, it's just so surprising how much can come out of something so small, especially when considering media is telling you to, no, don't play games, it's bad.
Yes, it's really funny, but also, because you also hear about the more like toxic communities with online games. I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with this, but it's kind of a stereotype that, especially in these kind of first-person shooter, these violent games, the actual online voice chat, when you talk to other players, not necessarily your own communities and your own friend while playing, it's quite toxic. It's a lot of insults, and it can get quite nasty. How's your experience with that?
I mean, most of the games I play are very much online games, but there's games like Call of Duty, which is this first-person shooter war game where everyone's playing online and all your stats get reported, so it just means that if someone kills you, you can get very angry and start being toxic, and it is very common, and it can be very damaging to people with mental health. But it's things like that make you realise that there are so many pros and cons to so many different things that you can't just close one thing off just because of this one thing has happened.
Yes, I completely agree with that. And I think another topic, which I was meaning to ask you a bit more about, was how do we even define pathological or excessive gaming? Because even when I tried to research this, I'm not sure how much people are familiar, but video game addiction recently became an official diagnosis.
Yeah.
And even that diagnosis doesn't have a set amount of hours of how much you need to be playing games for it to be dysfunctional. Instead, the definitions seem to be more on how much they interfere with your life, how much you're able to control it, if you feel that like you can't choose not to play games. Where does that distinction go from you, not only with yourself, but like from what you've seen? Like, when do things become more dysfunctional to you than helpful?
I guess when you have like these main priorities in your life, like you have university, you have your family and your friends, but I think when it starts becoming a problem is when your online community in a way becomes more important than your physical interactions with people and eating habits and your relationships with your family. For example, just like you're playing this game and your family comes in like, oh, we would like to all have dinner today, and they're like, no, I'd rather play this game. When it completely gets in the way of something that you loved beforehand and other hobbies, so you had so many different parts of your life, and then it just becomes gaming, I think that's when it really becomes a problem. But for some people, in a way, that's not a problem because it's almost like an escape, and some people really do need an escape sometimes, to sort of have that downtime where they just get to play games and be alone. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, because kind of the dysfunctional amount of gaming would require you to have something to neglect. And unfortunately, loneliness is such an epidemic in the UK today, so a lot of people wouldn't have any other meaningful interactions if they didn't have their games. Now, you can definitely say that, like, well, if they didn't play that many games, they might feel more motivated and have more energy and a desire to connect differently with other people. It might be more social, but at the same time, I think that's a very simplistic view of it.
Yeah, that makes complete sense, because if you just don't really know with anyone, because everyone is so completely different. You don't know if it's just someone avoiding, it's just they're enjoying themselves, they found this new thing, and because if someone could be playing almost 24 hours a day, and it's just because if it's new, it's not something that's damaging them, it's just, we're human beings, we like to explore things completely, but then there is an excessive amount that you can go that it is becoming a problem, like lack of sleep and not doing your work or going to work and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to remember that, as we touched on, that not everyone has the ability to do other things either, in terms of disabilities, some more like crippling types of disorders or situations where, well, maybe games can be kind of a relief or a freedom where you can interact with people in ways you just wouldn't be able to. And I think the fact that you see these very very good or very expansive social circles around games, not only while you play the game, so you have your set of friends, you will always play the same game together, but even for like external social circles. For example, we both go to the same university, and there is a computer and video game society there, and I'm assuming most universities and similar places have one, and there's always like social groups at maybe local game stores or similar to that, where people who aren't even playing the same games are still coming together and bonding over these shared interests, even though, as we're familiar with, like, games can be completely different. Like, you and I play completely different games, but seeing as we're still part of the same vague social circle who appreciate games and their online communities, we do have a lot in common.
Yeah, and it's just, you don't have to have a game in common to understand what a game can do for your mind, because I think that even if you do or don't experience symptoms of mental health, that a game can still be very beneficial to you, so you almost link on that understanding of just that euphoria of playing games, especially as a child. That's something that you did anyway, even if it was online or outside. When you grow up, there's all these things that get almost taken away from you, so you all get to go back to that reminiscent part, so you all get to bond over those sort of different qualities that you guys have.
Yeah, and it's quite nice that, like, and even if you can interact with people who don't play the same games as you, it's always like lovely to meet someone who likes the same game as you, because it's a bit different from liking the same movie. I mean, it's similar to be like, oh, that's your favourite movie as well, oh, amazing, because you can kind of relate that, oh, you see the world almost similar to me. But with a game, that's even more so, because games often take a lot longer, whilst the movie take around 2 hours to watch, and of course you might watch the extended editions and some behind the scenes things, but some games can take hundreds of hours to just finish the actual plot in the game, and some games are more open world and you can just keep going for as long as you want. So when you find someone else playing a game that you love, you know that they probably spent such a long time with it as well, and there's some unity in that, isn't there?
Yeah, it's especially when some games could be more difficult to other people, that when they struggle just as much as you are to get past a certain point in the game, you can bond over that, and you go through so many different emotions, like, oh, do you remember this part? I remember doing that part and it really annoyed me. That when someone you can relate to, especially if you do have mental health difficulties, that you feel alone so often, that when you relate to someone over something so menial as just,
and then safe in a way, like you bond to connect to someone over something that is safe and external to you as a video game. It's a lot easier to connect with someone, because that is not necessarily, oh, do you like me? It's more, oh, do we both like this thing? And it's something really nice and safe about that. And I also want to touch upon the fact that most games, the reason we play them is like they're goal-oriented. Like, we as humans, like we love goals, we love attaining goals. It feels nice when you beat that level, it feels nice when you get more points. Again, those of us playing Candy Crush, like, you finally beat that one puzzle level, like, amazing, you finally did it. Because we do like to pursue goals, and I think, for example, with depression and other problems like that, it's very easy to become very demotivated and very hard to feel any kind of satisfaction by reaching a goal, so you stop doing things you normally would in your real life. Because why should I do something difficult when I don't feel any pleasure from having done it? And I think in that way, even like smaller, more casual games can be very beneficial, because they are designed, for better or for worse, to give you that little happiness when you beat them. Obviously to keep you playing, and that can be a bit insidious in terms of addiction, but it can be very, very helpful. Just little mobile games to be like, oh, you did that, you put effort into something, and has a reward. Didn't that feel good? Don't you want to do things now? It
just sort of shows you that hard work does lead to good things. So it's almost like that. When you're playing a video game and you get stuck for such a long time, and then you work for it and then you achieve it, you almost feel like in real life that could be the same thing. So it could almost be that sort of push that you need to get outside and have that motivation to be like, you know what, if I work hard, I know I can get this. Even if it's just that levelling up in a game that seems just not that big of a deal to anyone else, that could be that one push that you do need. And it's something that everyone sort of needs in their life, is that one little push. And even if it is video games or if it's a family member, it's still something that someone needs.
Yeah, that's very true. And to be fair, that can go both ways. If you feel it easier to achieve a goal in a video game, than achieving real life things when
Yeah,
you
completely.
then tend to go towards video games because I feel better and it's easier to beat that level than finish my essay, for example. Like
Yeah.
I'm victim of that personally.
Same.
Sometimes it is more fun to do a challenge in a video game than obviously like clean my room.
Yeah, of course.
Obviously, but the mechanisms are the same, and I think my goal for this would at least be to make people a bit more conscious of their own use, because that's what it comes down to, isn't it?
Yeah.
As with anything, like with watching TV shows, consuming alcohol and the like. Well, like it's not necessarily bad if you do it. It's when it takes over your life or it becomes a replacement for other things you should rather be working on.
Yeah.
And I think as long as you extend the consciousness to video games, I don't think video games are detrimental for your mental health. And I do think they can be very beneficial as long as you know a bit what you're doing.
Oh yeah, completely. Like, it's not something that has to be in your life or has to not be in your life. But if it is something you're interested in, it can be very beneficial.
So yeah, overall, I do think that the overall conversation about video games in mainstream media is a bit too much on the negative side. But again, there are definite pitfalls you can fall into. But I think overall, it would just be nice to see more nuanced discussions on video games, so the actual problems that can happen can be addressed more appropriately, instead of making a blanket statement of, well, video games causes aggression, violence and loneliness, when the truth might be a lot more complex than that.
Oh yeah, of course, because there's also a load of topics that we haven't actually discussed today, like small games can improve working memory and time management and anything. So there are so many different things that people don't really discuss at all.
Yeah, definitely. And just the mechanics of games, of making something fun. There's a lot of fitness apps, for example, that are now trying to incorporate more elements in video games to make people want to use them more, like giving you points for exercising or other things like that to motivate you a bit more, because it is something very, very beneficial about it.
Yeah, and we've managed to cover a lot of topics today, but that is the end of our show.
Yeah, for now, and in the future we'd love to engage in more topics similar to this and different. Like, our aim is to discuss a lot of things around mental health, but in a more nuanced way. I guess a bit more based on our own experiences, but also with research.
Well, thank you for listening. I've been Ellie.
And I've been Gulli.
And this is Anxious Tea Time.